The first of the 4 fundamental themes for this conference is about integrating partnerships to work together. And I'm delighted to welcome our first keynote speaker for today. Dr. Paul Bate is Chief Executive of the UK Space Agency. Paul began his career as a particle physicist with undergraduate and PhDs at the University of Manchester, then moved into consultancy, then moved into number 10 in the policy unit for many, many years, specialised in digital healthcare, moved into the commercial sector, and then joined the Space Agency about 3 years ago. It's a real privilege for me to welcome Paul as well, because he is my boss. He appointed me last year to join the UK Space Agency. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we give a warm welcome to Dr. Paul Bate, CEO of the UK Space Agency.
Good morning, everybody. And Anu, thank you for that introduction. These are going to be a fascinating 2 days of discussions, and you are in excellent hands, expert hands, as Anu guides those discussions. Know thyself, know thy enemy, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories. As you may be aware, this is not a quote from the UKSA corporate plan, nor indeed from the National Space Strategy. However, we are living in uncertain and uncomfortable times, and though Sun Tzu may not yet be essential space reading, The Art of War does remind us that in uncertainty it pays to focus on what we know, not just on what the unknowns are. We know that we live in an age of space, with satellites underpinning the UK economy and our daily lives. 16% of UK GDP depends on space-based services, and £1 billion of GDP will be forfeited each day for at least a week if the GPS signal is lost. But this is small scale compared to what is coming, with McKinsey forecasting the global space economy to triple by 2035, reaching $1.8 trillion per year. We know that the commercial and country-level winners are already beginning to emerge. SpaceX, by way of example, increased in value by nearly $180 billion in the last 5 years and leads the market in launch and satellite volumes, showing what can happen when government and entrepreneurial business come together. India, China, Gulf states, and many others are investing heavily in their national space capabilities. And with humanity's return to the moon, the public's interest in space will reignite, as will its power on the global stage. We also know that improved national security, transformation of public service delivery, whole new industries, and a structural boost to economic productivity await from the effective use of space. The world changes when seamless connectivity, precise navigation, and ubiquitous observation of activity anywhere on Earth is a reality. Satellites in low Earth orbit uniquely make this possible, flying overhead every 2 hours and passing within 500 kilometers of every single country, seeing, hearing, transmitting, communicating with anything and to anywhere on Earth. And the effective freedom from gravity's effects makes breakthroughs in our understanding of physical processes possible, with the discoveries in life sciences and advanced manufacturing that result as part of the in-orbit economy. We know that the threats from and in space are equally real. This is not a conference where I need to make the case for protecting and defending space assets from hostile actors. Protecting our critical national infrastructure from solar activity is also essential, as is playing our part before a chain reaction of satellite collisions destroys access to entire orbits. The good news is that we know that the UK is well positioned if we act now. We've made the investments to stay in the game, and the commercially focused approach of the UK positions us well as space becomes increasingly driven by the private sector. We are, for example, investing £50 million in the development of state-of-the-art space infrastructure and facilities through the Space Clusters Infrastructure Fund, which has already unlocked a further £50 million in match funding. It's impressive to see people from so many space clusters at the conference today. The European Space Agency alone gives a £9.80 return for every pound invested by the UK. And the UK has brought in 17% of recent private investment into space, ranking second in the world after the US. Put together, we know that space is high value, fast moving, and the rewards will fall to those who act now and act for the long term. Most of all, we know that space matters. And I suspect we are all used to thinking about space for the value that it brings to society, to our way of life. National security and protection from space-based threats, our international collaborations, the fundamental discoveries, the data for citizens, the economic growth. But I want to also draw our attention to the role that science, innovation, and technology play, that space plays, as a bastion of defense and as a beacon of hope. 3 centuries ago, the scientific revolution powered the Enlightenment, transforming views of nature and society, allowing ideas to flow and technological leaps forward that shaped the world. Those technologies were used for defense and attack in the revolutions that followed. Ultimately, the Enlightenment's successful drive for tolerance and liberty was made possible by science and innovation. Freedom of thought, just as freedom of action, is fragile and it is precious. The Enlightenment's rise of scientific societies and academies across Europe, providing safe spaces to expand human knowledge, and also protected those persecuted for their views. Just so today, the science and technology ecosystems that we build, and that includes the conferences like this one today, do more than secure future missions and in-orbit infrastructure. They are the lifeblood for the dissemination of thought between organizations and individuals. But there has been a tendency in policy discussions to separate civil and defense interests in space, connected by a Venn diagram of dual use, but with much more outside the central zone than within it. In this age of space, and with freedom challenged in a way we've not seen for a generation, we no longer have that luxury. Civil space agencies have a key role to play in fostering resilience to the threats we face collectively, and a competitive commercial space sector can give strategic depth to national defense. We can be proud of what we have already achieved together. Earlier this year, we launched the National Space Operations Centre, the NSPOC, jointly led by UK Space Command and the UK Space Agency in partnership with the Met Office. NSPOC combines and coordinates civil and military space domain awareness capabilities to enable UK space operations and protect our interests in space and on Earth from space-related threats, risks, and hazards. Space domain awareness underpins all space activities and is a critical requirement for delivering a wide range of UK civil and military space objectives. Since its inception in May of this year, NSPOC has monitored 237 re-entries for fragmentation events, and we have warned UK licensed satellite operators of 8,373 potential in-orbit collision risks. That number is out of date. This is a concrete example of civil defence cooperation to protect the UK. Some of our NSPOC colleagues are in the exhibition space and will be delighted to talk to you about their work. And we are going further. We have identified dual-use capabilities as a priority for the UK Space Agency and are committed to a cross-departmental approach through our Unlocking Space for Dual-Use programme. The programme will create opportunities for organisations developing dual-use capabilities, improving public services by identifying where civil and defence requirements exist and opportunities overlap, and where joint capabilities can be built. From telecoms to Earth observation, investing in space technologies can benefit both the UK economy and national defence, and therefore UK resilience. To gain a better understanding of how we can both support and best support the UK space sector on dual use. We've conducted extensive engagement with space sector organisations and beyond. During this process, we identified no fewer than 24 barriers, including, and these may not be a surprise to you, unclear end customer needs, export controls and regulations, and funding and investment support. It's by understanding these insights that we're able to propose new interventions, such as support for industry with information on dual use, identifying existing joint funding opportunities between the agency and the Ministry of Defence, and providing guidance on procurement and security classifications. Space is an inherently international domain, and we have many international colleagues in the room today. The global economy is now underpinned by satellite connectivity. Britain strives to be both a good global citizen and a global space power, promoting space technology for the good of humanity as well as protecting vital national interests. We cannot do one without the other. Without being willing to put the use of space centre stage to further our prosperity and influence, we do not have a seat at the table when deciding the rules and norms for the responsible and sustainable uses of space. Space is a team sport. We must continue to show why the UK is a responsible partner of choice in delivering missions and capabilities. As the UK resets its relationship with Europe, in the space sector we are, in some respects, ahead of the game. As a founding member of the European Space Agency, we have continued to engage with European partners, and we value the opportunities that our membership provides for UK leadership in science and innovation, as well as the benefits felt in the UK and across Europe and beyond from the missions and programmes that we are part of. These are strong foundations, but they need to be built upon. Our technology roadmaps across civil and military are shared, but not co-developed or jointly owned. Our missions are typically separate, and while we need to recognise the different military and civil requirements, there are opportunities for much more to be done jointly. So, while we all have busy roles, and our eye is often on the detail, it pays to keep at the front of our minds that we go further when we go together, and that in the darkness of space shines that beacon of hope. A hope that relies on national security as much as understanding the universe and building UK prosperity, and which requires us to weave our civil and military approaches together. I wish you a productive day, and I look forward to our continued and deepened cooperation across civil and military space. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Paul. It's really set the scene and the challenge carrying on with that theme. Just looking at our schedule, we have plenty of time. I'm not sure what your schedule's like, Paul. Are you okay to take questions from the audience? Okay. Now I'm going to go to my Slido, which nothing... I do have Slido. So I'm going to go Slido first. You said Britain seeks to be a global space power. Could you clarify what you mean by global space power, Paul?
So I will take you to the forward from the National Space Strategy, which refers to the UK as being in the front rank of space nations, and then it sets out what that means, what it means around the different capabilities in the Space Industrial Plan, which I think we'll be talking about a little bit later. That sets out 5 priority capabilities across 22 in all, so it seeks to create that leadership in capabilities. It also seeks to do so through the way in which we invest. We have an open investment approach, so we balance the capability needs with the open investment needs. But we also seek to be a global space power, not just through our funding and through the capabilities, but by our place on the world stage. Perhaps the starting point for that is the work that we do on space sustainability, where we support and at times lead our colleagues with in UN USA and the Committee for the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, for example, on space sustainability guidelines. So part of that space power desire is the missions, the capabilities, the investment that we put into space. Part of it is the way we collaborate internationally, and part of it is how we choose to lead in the regulatory frameworks that we seek to get alignment on across the world.
Thanks very much, Paul. I've got another one on Slido. How do you plan to maintain ahead of the game in space whilst also collaborating internationally?
So I think that goes to the heart of what it means to be a member of the European Space Agency and to collaborate bilaterally as we do, particularly with the US, with Canada, with Japan, with Australia and a number of other states. In all those cases, we're working from the basis that we do go further together, that the collaboration makes sense. But to take the European Space Agency as an example, right at the heart of the way the European Space Agency is funded, just in case people weren't aware, the European Space Agency, wholly separated from the European Union and Commission. It is owned by its member states, or 23 member states, and the UK puts in around about 10% of the funding. The way in which that funding works is by something called geo-return. It means that if the UK, as it did in November 2022, puts in 1.8 billion euros for the coming 5 years, written into the constitution of the European Space Agency's founding principles, is that that money flows back to UK industry and academia. And that as a member state, we get to have a say in how that money is spent. Sometimes it's on programs for advanced telecoms, which we might do wholly within the UK, but using ESA infrastructure. Sometimes it will be a multinational mission, like the Vigil mission or the Rosalind Franklin mission to Mars, where we have to collaborate, because quite frankly, we're not going to put a Stevenage-built rover on the surface of Mars on our own, but that is exactly what will happen because we collaborate in the European Space Agency and with our NASA colleagues. But the way in which we do that is by focusing on which elements of industry, which elements of academia most benefit from the money that we put into the European Space Agency. It is that balance of collaboration and maintaining competitive advantage that we focus on.
Thanks, Paul. I've got all the questions piling in here. I know time is limited, so we've got time for 2 more here. There's a really interesting one because it does come down to the tensioning we have to make as an ExCo. Where should the focus on dual use be to gain the greatest returns? Is it on that low TRL level technology part of the spectrum or the high TRL mission concepts?
So I don't think it's either or, but I do think one of the things, and I touched on this in the speech, is that the technology road mapping can be the starting point for the high TRL and the specific missions. And we already collaborate. I mean, we work very closely with DSTL, for example. But I think there is a strong argument now when we look at the fact that so much of the technology that we build and we have in orbit and on the ground segment is fundamentally, it's the same science, it's the same technology, it's the same engineering, it just has different uses. It needs to be more shared. So I would like to see us start, if you like, the minimum, the foundation is the road mapping, so we know and we are open and public about which technologies we are choosing to invest in. I think that gives us more opportunity then to build the missions and direct those where appropriate to be more shared.
Thanks very much. Paul, again, with the questions flooding in, I'm going to take the last question now. The previous ones were anonymous, but this one is from William Gatwood from the UK delegation to NATO. Pleased to see you and the Minister talk about space defence being a team sport. Where does NATO fit into the UK Space Agency's vision for collaboration? And a heads up from William, he's going to be asking this question a lot over the next 2 days, so you're the dry run as such, Paul.
Okay, well, I'm not going to give a full answer to that because there are other people in the conference much better able to comment. But the Space Agency works most closely with UK Space Command, with General Tedman, with the Ministry of Defence, with DSTL and other as well, of course. The NATO relationships are held by our defence colleagues, but we make sure that we also have links in on a variety of NATO committees and other structures, but I don't want to overplay the UK Space Agency role on what is fundamentally a defence alliance.
That's great. Paul, thank you very much for your time and your presentation and fielding the questions. My apologies that we did not get through the entire run-through, because otherwise we'd probably have you on stage for the rest of the morning, Paul. I believe you're staying around for some of today, is that correct? But for colleagues in the auditorium and those online, can we please give a thank you to Paul for really setting the scene for this conference over the next 2 days. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you.